John Casson, the Coach Development Manager, and Gwen Watkins, Far Western Region Manager. And we're going to invite them to chime in with examples of some of the different things we're talking about here, if it comes up. So, and this is a topic that I went over with John in developing some new themes and messaging that we want to send with our overall programming. So, just to put this in context, this is an annual series of workshops based on the club development curriculum. So we're in November, and since we're getting into the startup of our programs, if not well past the startup of our programs, depending on where you are, this is a good time to really look at programming setup. And today's topic is kind of a big picture messaging topic, so it'd be good to walk into the season with your staff, your club, your families, your parents, your athletes, maybe addressing this new messaging platform. This webinar is being recorded, and all of the former webinars that we've gone through almost 2 full cycles now can be found at this link there on the screen. So be sure to go back and use those. The idea was to lay these tracks down, so to speak, so that you could go back through the variety of topics and review them as a club or as a staff. So that's access to those recordings. So the topic today is a new messaging platform. Our main guidelines for training and athlete development and programming and coaching, for that matter, in all of our sports is encased in this training systems model. And the training systems does an accurate job and an effective job of really laying out all the details of each phase of development and each domain of development. But what often happens, and what we often find, is that people, including ourselves, to be honest, get maybe lost in the trees without seeing the forest. And especially with such a detailed and comprehensive model as the training systems and all the different details represented by the 6 or 7 different domains and the 6 phases of development, we can really get lost in the details, maybe without sending the right overall message, which we've now worked toward boiling down to 3 fundamental concepts that really are the foundation for everything else we do as clubs, coaches, athletes, and parents. And the important thing with these concepts, which is represented by the training systems, is that capacity in these areas and ultimately building higher and higher levels of capacity really only happens over a long period of time in all 3 of these areas. So that if we look at that training systems model and all the details, and we are always focused more simply on these 3 overriding themes at all times and the balance that needs to be represented by these 3 themes or concepts, that's where we're really doing our athletes justice over time. So we're just going to take the first one of fundamentals, and we've defined fundamentals as the basic skills that build the foundation for more specialized skills. So I use the analogy here of mathematics. You know, we can all remember back to the 2 + 2 = 4 days, and then if you look at something like a calculus equation, really the only difference between 2 + 2 = 4 and the complex equation of calculus is that it's many simple steps to get through that process and to get to the correct answer. And I think that's an analogy that to take toward the teaching and development of our sports and our athletes, is that if we focus on the simple fundamentals at all times, then and only then can we build those simple fundamentals into the complex skills and capacities that we need for success at the highest level, or ultimately to take any athlete to their full potential. So now going into kind of the strategies for focusing on fundamentals. One main strategy, and I meant to make the point too, but before we started, these three concepts and focuses are really something that is coming not only out of a lot more work directly with clubs and really getting a good sense of what some of the best coaches and some of the best clubs really focus on, as well as our national team coaches and our internal staff. So this isn't so much my theory or my idea, but really what we're trying to aggregate from the knowledge base of both internally and in the field. And so just wanted to make that point. So when we're focusing on fundamentals and making that point to stick to a fundamental base, one thing that rings true again across many different levels of the sport is that we really need to emphasize technique before tactics, and that will lead to a more solid fundamental base in the sport. And oftentimes I think this is a challenge at every level. We wind up wanting to jump into tactics and maybe not fully develop technique, and then we're not working in the competitive environment with a full solid base of fundamentals. So technique is always primary to tactics, and it's important that we separate those if we're focusing on fundamentals. Second strategy for focusing on fundamentals would be really always using this idea of progressive training and progressive progressions in everything that we do, really in every domain, and certainly at every phase of development. This is from the youngest athletes to the most advanced and most mature athletes, that always going through progressions in terms of difficulty, in terms of complexity, in terms of the speed at which we're doing things, and certainly the terrain, different terrain considerations. And again, this is applicable to every phase. It's applicable to every sport. And I think again, oftentimes we think that if we're over in the right column here, if we're doing hard, advanced, fast, steep stuff with our athletes, that boy, we're really advancing them quickly, and they're doing just that. They're doing hard, advanced, fast stuff on steep slopes or on really challenging terrain. But oftentimes that is not a focus on fundamentals, and athletes are learning lots of bad habits, defensive skiing or snowboarding techniques. And so it's real important, no matter what level, that we're working through this progression, especially whenever we're introducing a new fundamental skill or a new fundamental drill. We want to back up even with the highest level athletes and make sure we're presenting it easy, simple, slow, and on moderate terrain first, and moving on from there. Another strategy for focusing on fundamentals, and again, this is kind of an overriding strategy, is that when we are giving feedback to our athletes, this is a real discipline that I think coaching staffs, we see lots of coaching staffs really needing to work on this together, and have agreements of what common terminology and feedback they're going to give the athletes. But the point here is really that we want to make sure that all feedback is going back to the root causes, or the fundamental causes of what's happening, not focusing on the effects. And I think this is often a challenge for coaches, because what we see is the effects. And so what our first reaction often is when we're analyzing athlete movements, or when we're giving athletes feedback, is, since it's the effect that we're seeing, we often gravitate toward giving feedback around the effect, versus really taking a step back and thinking about the cause, the fundamental root cause of what we're seeing, And one way that many coaches and clubs, I think, focus on successfully with that is to really just analyze what the skis and or snowboard are doing on the snow. That is our connection to the ground. In most sports, even if we're going off ground to perform certain elements, our connection to the ground is kind of that cause, that root cause, that where those fundamentals are the most easy to address or recognize. So cause coaches coaching, not effect coaching. Next strategy for focusing on fundamentals would be to set very clear expectations, both in your progressions and with your athletes, as to what needs to be mastered or what level of mastery needs to be achieved before you're going to introduce new skills and new tasks. And so with those going back to that progressive approach, also making it clear that we don't go to the next progression, and this will be different for each individual athlete, but we don't go to the next more complex, steeper terrain until there's a mastery of the basics and the fundamentals. And finally, I kind of alluded to this earlier. When we're focusing on fundamentals, this will both require and also help us as staffs develop more common language, many programs, and we certainly through our clinics and resources have very, very technical terms and glossaries and things that we all can, whether we're in the East or the West, when we say something, we have a common definition for that. And I think that's very important when we're saying that we want to focus on fundamentals, that the fundamental language we use as coaches and staffs is very consistent. Otherwise, we wind up saying, well, we're focusing on fundamentals, and yet we're throwing 10 different terms at our athletes that mean the same one fundamental concept or skill or task. So I think that, again, this focusing on fundamentals both develops this and it requires this. Otherwise, we're not really focusing on fundamentals. And the other thing to consider here is making sure that we can focus on the same fundamentals but use a variety of age-appropriate communication techniques to still point back to those same fundamentals, so that as athletes move through our programs, they will maybe have a different age-appropriate language from different coaches, but the core, that there is a good explanation from each coach along the way that we're talking about the same basic fundamentals that are common across our programs and even across the country, ideally. Before we move on, you guys have anything to add to fundamentals? Or anybody have questions on fundamentals in the chat? We've got a question coming in. Okay, it looked like somebody was typing there, but we'll take questions if they pop up. But moving along to the second message that we want to send is this message of athleticism. Okay, Dean, we'll get to the joy factor. That's the third main concept here we'll get to. So athleticism we've defined as the application and adaptation of movements through a variety of environments. And this montage that I put on this slide here, I think, we, especially since this is, many of us are in multi-sport clubs and environments, and even any one of our sports is really multi-sport or multi-discipline focused. I think there's no more important arena than our sports to really focus on broad athleticism. Because if you look at this variety of environments and the variety of things that our athletes do, it's hard to think of a more open environment in many other sports. John and I were talking yesterday, and we came up with two, and maybe surfing and or kayaking. Thank you. Other than dynamic moving water sports, it's pretty tough to come up with a sport that requires that is in such an open environment as skiing and snowboarding, and that requires the diversity of athletic abilities. And so I think it's important that we send that message to our athletes, and that we really, above and beyond anything else, if we focus on developing athleticism more than anything else, then we will have better and better skiers, better and better ski racers, better and better snowboarders, better and better competitors in all of our various sports. So moving along with athleticism, these movements through a variety of environments, we apply, we adapt to these different environments, and then when we get to the specifics of our sports, then we need precision. But it doesn't happen the other way around. We will not be able to develop precise sport-specific movements in our specific sports until we've learned to apply and adapt multiple different movements through multiple different environments, because that's in fact what our sports are. We need to be able to be precise in an extraordinarily diverse environment and through an extraordinarily diverse range of motions and athletic skills. And so athleticism, again, we have to go in this progression. Physical literacy. We didn't want to brush through this or blow by it, because it is a movement and a field of study in and of itself. And so to not brush by it, that's why we put what is physical literacy, and we want basically this to encourage any clubs, any coaches to really understand at a very basic level what the fundamentals of physical fitness are, and get resources through more basic physical literacy research. Get involved with the physical literacy movement that other educators and schools and other sports organizations are engaging in. And this is because this is kind of the fundamentals of physical fitness, and we're not going to go deep into it here because it's not necessarily our level of expertise. But the point here being, let's make sure that we reach out and get this level of expertise in our clubs, so that we're not, again, diving into real sport-specific movements and athleticism before we understand the basic fundamentals of physical fitness and physical literacy. So moving on to the next strategy for athleticism, stressing the importance and progression for multi-sport. We've already talked about progression and obviously this broad base of athleticism. This is this little chart here on the screen is the excerpt from the multi-sport participation line and recommendations in the new training systems model. And this is we've worked hard on this language to really send home the point that number one, this is something we get asked all the time. What age should my athletes still be playing multiple sports? What sports should they play early? How many sports should they play when they're reaching late high school age or becoming an elite or specialized competitor later on? And ultimately, while these are recommendations and sort of walk through the stages of development, it really also, one point that needs to be made always is that it depends on every athlete. every athlete is going to go through this progression differently. There's no absolute right or wrong. So that's one thing to keep in mind for a focus on multisport. What we do know is that any athlete is going to benefit from a variety of athletic activities. But if you look at this progression and walk through it, early on, we absolutely want to engage and participate in as much physical activity as possible, explore coordination and balance based sports. So anything early on that we're doing to really emphasize ultimately play in open environments and balance-based sports are going to lay that foundation for everything else we do in our specific sports. And then as you get into some of those mid stages of development, so middle school and entering high school, we want to continue participation in many activities and sports. But then if you look at that language, we then start to begin to identify with maybe a primary versus a complementary sport. And that would be, sort of in late middle school, entering into high school, that we start to think, and our athletes start to think of, I'm primarily a snowboarder, but I also soccer. And then that sort of transitions through high school, and that if as in any sport, to be a world class or an elite competitor in any single sport, then there is a tremendous amount of focus on that specialized sport, but the complementary sports and activities are still extremely important to use for injury prevention, avoiding burnout, and maintaining all aspects of physical fitness, and not getting so specialized that ultimately the opposite of that, you're injured, you're burnt out on the sport, and you're not physically fit all around as an all-around athlete, therefore sort of negating the purpose of becoming specialized. So really looking at this as a progression and emphasizing the importance of this all the way through the development of your athletes is an important message of athleticism. Next strategy for athleticism would be to make sure that we're developing, fostering, and understanding that athleticism is built from many different important elements. Everything from the understanding of those phases of development and growth themselves, what the body is doing at different stages, what it's capable of doing at different stages, and then in these 5 primary areas that make up physical fitness, which is endurance, mobility, strength, power, and motor skills. And then nutrition is definitely something that is a primary contributor to physical fitness as well. So we need to make sure that our athletes and our messaging throughout includes that. And really, again, this is all about balance and being a broad athlete, a broadly skilled athlete, because you could have any one of these things, and this is often what you see in your clubs, or certainly what we see when athletes make the national team, is that they may be off the charts in any one of these areas, which has sort of carried them. Maybe they're super strong, or have a super broad aerobic base. But in order to get to the next level, they really need more balance throughout all these different elements. And I think that's something that we need to send, a message we need to send more clearly, and structure our programs that way more early and often, so to speak, so that kids right from the get-go understand all of these different elements. And then ultimately on the right here, that goes right back to this overall definition, is that movement, if you put all of these different elements together, we will be able to have strong, fit, agile, powerful athletes that are in good shape, being able to move and do anything they need to do in any environment. And it takes all of these different elements in order to fit that definition of movements through a variety of environments. Another strategy for athleticism is really to kind of just maintain this idea of athlete first and athlete always in the mindset and messaging of your club and your coaches and the athletes. That if we look at the best athletes in our sports, most of them can step onto just about any playing field, or whether that's frisbee, something recreational like frisbee golf, or I hope I didn't offend anybody by calling golf recreational. But if we look at our the best athletes, they are athletes first, and then they are racers and free skiers and freestylers, half pipe, slope style, border cross. That ultimately, if we maintain this idea that the best athletes are going to be the best competitors in our sports, we're going to send a clearer message for long-term development. More specifically, the way that we need to continue to develop that in our training techniques is to really utilize the spectrum of activities to vary training throughout the season, throughout an athlete's career. And I put on these, there's 6 different sort of spectrums of training, everything from unguided free play to guided or focused free skiing or free riding or free play, to using all different conditions, to drills in open environment, meaning drills without things stuck in the snow, basically, to drills in a closed environment, so drills with cones, brushes, gates, and then a competition simulation. And oftentimes I think that maybe the spectrum we talk about is sort of only these 2, sort of competition simulation and drills in closed environments, or free skiing or free riding. And we maybe don't really recognize or use the full spectrum of the different types of things we can do in any given training session or throughout the whole progression of a season or a training block. That we really have a lot of creativity here in these 4 areas that maybe we don't use enough, going from anything from, again, just absolute unguided, get out there and ski and snowboard, to while you're skiing and snowboarding today, focus on this, moving that into various conditions, and doing drills without necessarily the venue, the gates, the half pipe, the slopestyle course, and then moving into those venues and to competition simulation. I would say that, going around to clubs, I would say that our percentages of doing drills in closed environments and competition simulation is probably a much higher percentage of what we need to see overall in terms of developing a broader athletic base. So I boil this down also to one way we can do this is just always really encouraging mileage and variety. So if we had a training session that was primarily drills in a closed course, or maybe even drills in an open course, it should not be seen as the end of training when you say, okay, kids, go out and make a few more runs. That should be seen as an absolute vital part of training, and we really need to encourage our kids and our athletes to always look for more and more mileage, and then always making our training varied. We're gonna develop far more aspects of that athletic base. And back to the fun, putting the fun back in. We want to, the third concept that we wanted to use in our messaging is passion. And this is often, overused and maybe used in various ways. We've defined it as the fuel that drives athletes to strive for constant improvement. And I think the thing we wanted to emphasize here is that word constant, and that implication of, again, that long timeline, is that success in these sports at the highest levels, or being a lifelong participant, or a lifelong having a life of involvement in these sports, is the goal of our programs. And that doesn't come from being sort of fair weather fans of the sport, or fair weather having only training on the good days. And so our passion, the type of passion that we're really wanting to drive home in this messaging, is passion over a long period of time. Not sort of false enthusiasm like this guy down here, and not sort of this idea of one night stands where we do really intense things for a little while and then let it slide. It's more that fuel that drives constant improvement, building capacity over time. And as the great Yoda said, if you end your training now, if you choose the quick and easy path as Vader did, you will become an agent of evil, right? And so again, this idea that passion is not the one night stand passion, but it's kind of that passion of Yoda, the Force, doing it, doing things over time through adversity, not taking the shortcut. And another way of thinking about this with strategies for building passion is that I think, again, as coaches, parents, clubs, athletes, we really need to think of this idea of pacing in sort of everything we do. Because remember, in the initial definition of these themes, the increased capacity in all these areas of fundamentals and athleticism and even passion that is absolutely necessary for performance at the highest levels only builds over a long period of time. There is no way, even with passion, there's no way to just have passion quick and easy. We need to develop strategies that keep that passion growing over time. And as Dean commented earlier, that sort of joy that we feel from skiing, that has to be an aspect of our training and our messaging at all times. And I know that it is, but then oftentimes maybe we think that, well, we're so passionate about this sport, why isn't it carrying us? Well, it's the passion, again, that happens over a long period of time. So this analogy of kind of the pacing can extend to athlete development, right? Really doing the right things at the right time so that our athletes get stronger and stronger, not more and more burnt out. We can apply this idea of passion to even the expense of the sport, and equipment and things like that, where we're talking to parents and our coaches about whether it is a need for the 10-year-old to have 4 pairs of skis and a back protector and have 25 starts in a season. That's as much about keeping their passion as it is about anything else. And so, kind of getting into these ideas of burnout, retention, that really all goes back to passion being something that we drive home in practical ways, and that we monitor, and that we pace, and that we look for ways to build that over time, not just sort of have false enthusiasm, a lot of rah-rah, or one night stand type mentality. So with that, kind of summing up passion, that it's passion over time that will allow us to get to the achievements we want to get to, which is all the other things we say when we get to this kind of side of keeping the sport fun and being passionate about it. We know that we need to conquer adversity. We know that we need to have fun, perseverance, determination, having the patience to maybe take one step back and try something new, knowing that over time it's gonna get us 2 steps forward. That's the passion over time. That's what passion over time brings us, is an understanding that This is going to take some time, and it's my passion that keeps me involved and keeps me charging and keeps me constantly improving so that I can do all these things, from facing adversity to persevering through tough times. So those are the three foundational elements of messaging that we want to focus on in our USSA programming. And sort of before we get into any of the details, and I guess this is the language we're suggesting you use with your club communities and your coaching staff, that before anything else, these three concepts are the foundation for everything we do. And if we, as Dean is putting in the chat here, this other triad we have of coach, athlete, parent, if the coaches, the athletes, and the parents really understand what we just discussed with fundamentals, athleticism, and passion, and that it really has to be a balancing act between those three, and the magic is when all those three come together. Those are three very overriding themes that we can focus on every day in everything that we do. So, any questions or comments with that programming message? Silent approval, right? All right, well, as you see in the chat, I did put my email in the top of the chat box. It's real easy, bkrill@ussa.org. And if you have any questions or comments for me directly, just shoot me an email. We will, we recorded this again, and we'll be posting this. So this is something that you may choose to use in a staff or club orientation, and that's the intent of recording these, so that they can be distributed in that way. So thanks for joining us. Have a great Thanksgiving week next week, and we'll see you in December.